The maintenance corridor on level 7 was always quiet at this hour. Amy Sullivan preferred it that way. She could focus on her work without the constant chatter and noise that filled the main sections of Harmony Point Station. The lights here were dimmer too, set to energy-saving mode since few people passed through during the night shift. Amy knelt beside an open panel, her tools spread out on the metal floor beside her. The power relay had been acting up for 3 days now, causing minor fluctuations in the environmental systems. Nothing dangerous but annoying enough that someone needed to fix it. That someone was always her. At 24, she had already earned a reputation as the engineer who could fix anything. She hummed softly as she worked, her fingers moving with practiced ease through the tangled wires and circuits. The station around her was a marvel of cooperation, built jointly by humans and half a dozen alien species after years of war and negotiation. Amy had been proud to accept a position here 2 years ago, proud to be part of something bigger than herself. The sound of footsteps made her pause. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets echoing off the metal walls. Amy glanced over her shoulder and felt her stomach tighten. 3 Krivak soldiers were walking toward her, their reptilian features hard to read in the dim light. They were tall, much taller than her, with scaled skin that gleamed a dark green under the corridor lights. She had seen Krivak before, of course. The station was full of them. But something about these 3 made her uneasy. Maybe it was the way they walked, spread out across the corridor width, blocking any easy path around them. Maybe it was the time of night or the isolation of this section. Amy couldn't quite name what bothered her, but she felt it in her bones. She turned back to her work, trying to ignore the growing sense of danger. They were just passing through. They would walk past her and continue on their way. There was no reason to be afraid. The footsteps stopped. Amy's hands stilled on the wires. "Human female," one of them said. His voice was rough, the words heavily accented. "You are alone here." It wasn't a question. Amy slowly stood up, her tools forgotten on the floor. She forced herself to meet their eyes, 3 sets of cold, calculating stares. Her training kicked in, all the safety protocols she had memorized when she first arrived at the station. "I'm working," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Station maintenance. Is there something you need?" The middle one, the largest of the 3, tilted his head. There was something in his expression that made her skin crawl. It might have been amusement. It might have been contempt. With Krivak faces, it was hard to tell. "We need nothing from you," he said. Then he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "But perhaps we will take something anyway." Amy took a step back. Her mind raced through her options. The nearest emergency comm station was 30 meters behind her. Her personal comm device was in her tool bag, within reach but not in her hand. She could run, but they were faster. She could scream, but who would hear her down here? "I don't want any trouble," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I'm just doing my job. Let me finish and I'll be gone." They moved closer, spreading out further to block any escape route. Amy's heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Harmony Point was supposed to be safe. There were rules here, laws that everyone followed. "The cameras," one of them said to the others, speaking in their own language. Amy had learned enough Krivak to understand basic phrases. "They are disabled?" "Disabled," the largest one confirmed. He never took his eyes off Amy. "No one will see." The first blow came fast. Amy tried to dodge, but his arm was too long, too quick. His clawed hand caught her across the face, spinning her around and slamming her into the wall. Pain exploded through her skull. She tasted blood. She tried to scream, but another hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off the sound. She fought, kicking and thrashing, but it was like fighting steel. They were so much stronger than her, so much bigger. They took their time. That was the worst part. They could have finished quickly, but they didn't. They wanted to savor it, wanted to enjoy her fear and pain. They spoke to each other in their language, laughing at something she couldn't understand. Maybe they were laughing at her. Amy fought until she couldn't fight anymore. She screamed behind the hand that covered her mouth until her throat was raw. She begged, though she knew they wouldn't listen. And when none of that worked, when her body was too broken to resist, she retreated into her mind, trying to escape to somewhere they couldn't reach. Eventually, they stopped. She heard them talking again, their voices casual now, discussing something mundane. One of them kicked her in the ribs, not hard, just testing to see if she would react. Amy didn't move. She couldn't move. Their footsteps echoed away down the corridor, growing fainter and fainter until silence returned. Amy lay on the cold metal floor, her body screaming with pain, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Above her, the security camera that should have recorded everything remained dark, its indicator light dead. She didn't know how long she lay there. Time seemed to have stopped, or maybe she had stopped existing in any meaningful way. Her mind felt disconnected from her body, floating somewhere above the broken thing on the floor that used to be her. The sound of new footsteps finally penetrated her awareness. Different footsteps, lighter, quicker.
Human footsteps, oh my God, a voice said. Female, shocked, horrified.
Oh my God, hold on. Hold on, I've got you. Hands touched her, gentle this time, careful. Amy tried to speak, but her mouth wouldn't form words. She managed a small sound, something between a whimper and a sob. I'm Kate Morrison, station security, the voice said, close to her ear now. You're going to be okay. I'm calling medical right now. Can you tell me your name? Amy forced her eyes open. The woman kneeling beside her had short dark hair and a security uniform. Her face was young, but her eyes were hard, the eyes of someone who had seen combat. Those eyes were filled with rage now, a cold fury that somehow made Amy feel safer. Amy, she managed to whisper. Amy Sullivan. Amy, I need to know what happened. Who did this to you? Krivak, Amy said. The word came out broken, barely audible. 3 of them. The cameras. Kate's jaw tightened. She glanced up at the dead camera above them, then back at Amy. I understand. Medical is on the way. I'm not going to leave you, okay? I'm right here. Amy wanted to thank her, wanted to say something, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. She felt herself slipping away, her consciousness fading like a light being turned down slowly. The last thing she heard was Kate's voice speaking urgently into her comm device. This is Morrison. I need a full medical team to Maintenance Corridor D7 immediately. I have a human female, mid-20s, severe injuries consistent with assault. I need security backup, and I need someone to check the surveillance system. The cameras in this sector are down. There was a pause, then Kate's voice again, harder now with an edge that cut like steel. And someone get Captain Price on the line. Tell him we have a serious situation. Tell him it's going to get worse before it gets better. The medical team arrived in what felt like seconds but must have been longer. Amy was barely conscious, floating in and out of awareness as they moved her onto a stretcher. She heard voices, professional and efficient, calling out medical terminology she didn't understand. Someone put an oxygen mask over her face. Someone else was scanning her with medical instruments. Kate stayed beside her the whole time, her hand on Amy's shoulder, a solid presence in the chaos. Amy focused on that touch, using it as an anchor to keep from drifting away completely. As they lifted the stretcher and began moving toward the medical bay, Amy turned her head slightly and saw Kate standing in the corridor, staring up at the dead camera. Even through her pain and shock, Amy could see the determination in the security officer's stance. Kate pulled out a small device and began recording the scene with her personal equipment, documenting everything. She was looking for evidence, Amy realized. She was already investigating. The thought brought a tiny spark of hope to Amy's dark and terrified mind. Maybe someone would believe her. Maybe someone would do something about what had happened. Maybe the Krivak soldiers wouldn't get away with it. But as the medical team carried her around a corner and Kate disappeared from view, Amy felt that hope flickering and dying. She knew how these things worked. She had heard the stories from other stations, whispered accounts of incidents that were buried and forgotten. The Krivak had diplomatic immunity. They had power and influence. They had made sure the cameras didn't work, and she was just one person. One human woman who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The darkness finally claimed her completely as the medical bay doors opened. Her last conscious thought was a bitter one. No one was meant to see them hurt her. The cameras had malfunctioned just as planned. And even with Kate Morrison investigating, even with evidence of what had been done to her body, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that justice was something she would never see. The station continued its endless rotation, maintaining the careful illusion of peace and cooperation. Somewhere in the diplomatic quarters, 3 Krivak soldiers were probably sleeping soundly, confident that they... Captain Jacob Price looked tired. He always looked tired these days, Kate thought. But this morning he looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. He sat behind his desk in the station commander's office, his hands folded in front of him, staring at the report she had submitted 3 hours ago. "This is bad," he said finally. "This is really bad, Lieutenant Morrison." Kate stood at attention, her uniform crisp despite the fact that she hadn't slept. "Yes, sir." "I documented everything I could at the scene. Medical has confirmed that Amy Sullivan's injuries are consistent with assault by multiple attackers. The forensic evidence suggests Krivak physiology based on the claw marks and the force of the blows." Price rubbed his face with both hands. "And the cameras?" "Dead, sir. All 6 units in Corridor D7 went offline at exactly 2200 hours. They came back online at 2315. Someone knew how to disable our surveillance system without triggering any alarms. That's not easy to do." "No, sir, it's not. It requires detailed knowledge of our security protocols and access to some sophisticated equipment." Price stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the station's central hub. Ships came and went in the distance, tiny points of light against the darkness of space. "You know what's going to happen now, don't you?" Kate didn't answer. She knew. Ambassador Vexthor has already filed a formal complaint about your investigation. He's calling it harassment and suggesting that Amy Sullivan is lying to create an incident. He says his soldiers were in their quarters all evening and have multiple witnesses to confirm it. With respect, sir, he's lying. Price turned to face her. His expression was sad, almost defeated. "I know he is, Kate, but proving it is going to be nearly impossible. We have no footage. Amy can't identify which specific Krivak soldiers attacked her because she doesn't know their names or ranks. And the Krivak delegation is already circling the wagons. They're all providing alibis for each other." Kate felt anger rising in her chest but kept her voice professional. "So we do nothing? We let them get away with this?" "I didn't say that," Price said sharply. Then he sighed. "But we have to be smart about it. Earth Command is already breathing down my neck. Do you know how important the Krivak alliance is right now? We have 3 colonies that depend on trade routes through their space. Millions of humans whose lives could be affected if this alliance falls apart. What about Amy Sullivan's life?" The words came out harder than Kate intended. Price flinched, and for a moment she thought he might reprimand her for insubordination. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. One life matters just as much as 1,000,000 lives. That's what we're supposed to believe anyway. But the people making decisions at Earth Command don't always see it that way." Kate took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. "Permission to continue my investigation, sir?" Price was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Permission granted. But Kate, be careful. You're going to be under a microscope. Don't give them any excuse to shut you down." "Yes, sir." She left his office and headed straight for the medical bay. Amy had been sedated overnight, but Dr. Lisa Chen had told Kate she would be awake by morning. Kate needed to get a full statement while the memories were still fresh, before lawyers and politicians could muddy the waters. The medical bay was quiet, most of its beds empty. Amy lay in one of the private rooms, her face pale against the white pillow. Someone had cleaned her up, but the bruises were already starting to show. Dark purple marks that would get worse before they got better. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. "Amy?" Kate said softly from the doorway. "Can I come in?" Amy turned her head slowly. For a moment there was no recognition in her eyes, just a blank emptiness that made Kate's heart ache. Then something clicked and Amy's expression shifted to awareness. "You're the one who found me," Amy said. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Yes, I'm Lieutenant Kate Morrison. I'm investigating what happened to you." "There's nothing to investigate. They did it. The Krivak." Kate pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. She kept her posture open and non-threatening, the way she had been trained for interviews with trauma victims. "I believe you, Amy, but I need you to tell me everything you remember. Every detail, no matter how small." Amy closed her eyes. For a minute, Kate thought she had fallen back asleep, or maybe decided not to talk. Then she started speaking, her words slow and measured, like each one cost her something to say. She described the evening, the maintenance work, the 3 soldiers appearing in the corridor. She described their conversation, what they had said about the cameras. She described the attack itself, though her voice broke multiple times and Kate had to wait while she composed herself. Through it all, Kate recorded everything on her official device, making sure the statement was properly documented. "Did you see any identifying marks?" Kate asked when Amy finished. Scars, unusual coloring, anything that might help identify which 3 soldiers they were? Amy shook her head weakly. They all look the same to me. I know that's stupid, but I never learned to tell them apart. The big one, the leader, he had a scar on his left hand. I saw it when he... She stopped, unable to continue. That's good, Kate said gently. That's something. Did they say anything else? Any names, any mention of where they were going after? No, they laughed. They thought it was funny. And they said no one would see. They were so sure no one would see. Kate reached out and carefully took Amy's hand. Someone saw, I saw. And I'm not going to let this go, Amy, I promise you that. Amy's eyes filled with tears. They have diplomatic immunity. Everyone knows that. Even if you prove it was them, nothing will happen. They'll just send them home and that will be the end of it. Kate wanted to argue, wanted to promise that justice would be served, but she couldn't lie. Amy was right. The diplomatic protections in place made prosecution nearly impossible. But there had to be something, some way to make this right. She left the medical bay an hour later with a full statement and a burning determination that scared her a little. She had felt this way before during the war when she had watched friends die for no good reason. That determination had kept her alive through some terrible situations, but it had also made her take risks that nearly got her killed. Her next stop was the security office where Greg Palmer worked. Greg was intelligence, officially assigned to monitor potential threats to the station. Unofficially, he was the person you went to when you needed information that wasn't in the official reports. She found him at his desk, surrounded by computer screens showing various data streams. He looked up when she entered and immediately waved her over. I heard about the Sullivan case, he said without preamble. Bad business. You have anything for me? Greg glanced around to make sure they were alone, then pulled up a file on one of his screens. This is unofficial, understand? If anyone asks, we never had this conversation. Understood. Amy Sullivan isn't the first. I've been doing some digging through reports from other stations looking for patterns. In the last year, there have been 2 other incidents involving human women and Krivak soldiers. One on Station Orion, one on Gateway 7. Kate felt cold. What happened in those cases? Same thing that's about to happen here. Both women filed complaints. Both cases were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Both times the surveillance systems mysteriously malfunctioned. So this is a pattern. They're doing this deliberately. That's what it looks like to me. And here's the really interesting part. In both previous cases, the same Krivak delegation was present on the station when the assaults occurred, including Ambassador Vexthor. Kate stared at the screen, her mind racing. He knows. He's been covering for them. Can't prove it, Greg said. But yeah, that's my read. Someone in the Krivak command structure has been providing their soldiers with technology to disable our cameras. Someone has been making sure no evidence survives. And someone has been using diplomatic channels to shut down any investigations before they can gain traction. We need to go public with this. If people knew there was a pattern, if they knew this wasn't an isolated incident. Greg shook his head. It won't matter. Earth Command already knows. They knew about the other cases. They made the decision to let it slide because the alliance was more important. Do you really think they'll change their minds now? Kate wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had seen enough politics to understand how these things worked. The powerful protected each other. The weak suffered in silence. That was the way the universe operated, whether you were talking about humans or aliens, but she couldn't accept that. She wouldn't accept that. There has to be something we can do, she said. Greg looked at her for a long moment. There is, but it's risky, and it might end both our careers. I'm listening. He pulled up another file, this one showing technical specifications for Krivak military equipment. If they're using jamming devices to kill our cameras, those devices leave a signature. It's faint, but it's there. If we can scan the Krivak quarters with the right equipment, we might be able to prove they have the technology. We'd need authorization for that. We'd need a warrant or a security order from Captain Price. The tribunal room was cold. Amy hadn't noticed how cold the station kept these formal spaces until now, sitting in a hard chair facing a panel of judges who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, rather than a person who had been hurt. 3 humans sat on the left side of the panel. 3 Krivak sat on the right. In the middle was Ambassador Vexthor himself, serving as the neutral mediator. The irony of that wasn't lost on Amy. The person responsible for covering up the attack was now in charge of investigating it. Kate sat in the back of the room, her face carefully neutral, but Amy could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the edge of her seat. She was angry. They both were. "Miss Sullivan," Bextor said, his voice formal and cold, "please state for the record what you claim happened on the evening in question." Amy took a breath and began. She had practiced this, gone over it with Kate and with Dr. Chen. She knew her statement by heart, but saying it out loud in front of these people, with the 3 Krivak soldiers sitting across from her looking bored and contemptuous, was harder than she had imagined. She described the attack in clinical terms, trying to keep emotion out of her voice. When she mentioned specific details, she saw one of the Krivak judges making notes, his face unreadable. The human judges looked sympathetic but helpless, like they already knew how this would end. When she finished, Vexthor nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Sullivan. Now the accused soldiers have provided their own statement. They claim they were in their quarters all evening, engaged in leisure activities with fellow delegation members. Multiple witnesses have confirmed this." "They're lying," Amy said. The words came out sharper than she intended. "That is your opinion," Vexthor replied. "However, we must base our judgment on evidence, not opinions. Do you have any physical evidence that these specific soldiers assaulted you?" "The medical evidence shows. The medical evidence shows that you were injured. It does not show who injured you. Do you have any other evidence, any witnesses, any recording of the attack?" Amy felt her throat tighten. "The cameras were disabled. You know that." "Yes, there was a malfunction in that sector. Most unfortunate. But without evidence, we cannot proceed with accusations against decorated soldiers who have provided alibis." Kate stood up in the back of the room. "With respect, Ambassador, the timing of that malfunction is highly suspicious. It occurred at exactly the right time and in exactly the right location to hide a crime." Bexthor turned his cold eyes on Kate. "Lieutenant Morrison, you are here as an observer, not a participant. Please sit down. I'm here as the investigating officer, and my investigation has revealed a pattern of similar incidents on other stations, all involving Krivak soldiers, all with convenient camera malfunctions." The room erupted in noise. The Krivak judges began speaking rapidly in their own language, clearly angry. The human judges looked shocked, glancing at each other uncertainly. Vexthor's face remained calm, but Amy saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "That is quite an accusation, Lieutenant," he said softly. "I assume you have evidence to support such a claim?" Kate hesitated. Amy knew what that hesitation meant. Kate had the evidence, but she couldn't present it without revealing that she had obtained it through unauthorized means. If she pushed now, she would destroy her career and probably face criminal charges for violating diplomatic protocols. "I thought not," Vexthor said when Kate remained silent. "Baseless conspiracy theories have no place in this tribunal. You are dismissed, Lieutenant. If you make any further outbursts, I will have you removed from these proceedings entirely." Kate sat down slowly, her face flushed with anger and frustration. Amy wanted to thank her for trying, but the moment had passed. The tribunal was back under Vexthor's control. The hearing continued for another hour. Lawyers asked questions. Witnesses gave statements. Medical reports were reviewed and debated. Through it all, the 3 Krivak soldiers sat quietly, occasionally whispering to each other but never showing any sign of concern. They knew how this would end. Finally, Vexthor called for a recess so the judges could deliberate. Amy knew it was just for show. The decision had been made before the tribunal even started. Kate found her in the hallway outside. Amy was shaking, whether from cold or emotion she couldn't tell. Kate put a hand on her shoulder, solid and warm. "I'm sorry," Kate said. "I should have kept my mouth shut. I just made things worse." "You tried," Amy said. "That's more than most people would do." They stood in silence for a moment. Other people passed by, carefully not looking at them. Amy realized she had become toxic, someone to avoid. A reminder that bad things could happen even on a safe station like Harmony Point. It's not over, Kate said quietly. I promise you, Amy, this isn't over. But when they returned to the tribunal room and Vexthor announced the verdict, Amy felt what little hope she had left die completely. The judges had found insufficient evidence to support her claims. The 3 soldiers were cleared of all charges. Case closed. The human judges apologized, said they wished things were different, but their hands were tied by the evidence, or lack of it. The Krivak judges said nothing, simply stood and filed out of the room. The 3 soldiers followed them, and as they passed Amy's seat, the largest one, the one with the scar on his hand, looked directly at her and smiled. He knew he had won. They all knew. Kate walked Amy back to her quarters. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? The system had failed. Justice had been denied. Amy was expected to go back to work, to pretend nothing had happened, to share the station with her attackers and act like everything was normal. Take some time, Kate said at Amy's door. Dr. Chen has authorized medical leave. You don't have to come back until you're ready. Amy nodded numbly. She went inside and sat on her bed, staring at the wall. Hours passed. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She just sat there, feeling hollow. Somewhere else on the station, Kate Morrison was having a very different reaction to the tribunal's verdict. She returned to her quarters and immediately contacted Greg Palmer. The tribunal cleared them, she said without preamble. I heard. I'm sorry, Kate. Don't be sorry. Be ready. We're moving tonight. Greg was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? If we get caught? We won't get caught. And even if we do, I don't care anymore. They're going to keep doing this, Greg. They're going to hurt more people because they know they can get away with it. Someone has to stop them. Okay, Greg said. Okay, I've got the equipment. Meet me at Maintenance Access 7 in 2 hours. Kate spent those 2 hours getting her affairs in order. She wrote a letter to her parents, not explaining what she was about to do, but telling them she loved them. She reviewed her will, making sure everything was current. She even wrote a statement for Captain Price explaining her actions and accepting full responsibility. If this went wrong, she wanted to make sure no one else got blamed. At midnight, she met Greg in a quiet corner of the station's maintenance level. He had brought a scanning device that looked like a standard engineering tool, but Kate knew it was much more sophisticated than that. The Krivak quarters are on Deck 4, Greg said, showing her a schematic on his datapad. Heavy security, lots of cameras, guards at every entrance. We can't get in through normal means, so we go in through abnormal means. Greg smiled despite the tension. Exactly. There's a maintenance shaft that runs along the outside of their section. If we can get in there, we can scan through the walls. The device will pick up any jamming equipment they're hiding. Won't they detect our scan? Not unless they're actively monitoring for it. And why would they? They think they've won. They think no one is looking at them anymore. They made their way through the quiet station, avoiding main corridors and staying in the maintenance areas where few people traveled at night. Kate's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She had done dangerous things before during the war. This was just another mission. The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark. They crawled through it for what felt like miles, following Greg's navigation. Finally, he held up his hand and they stopped. This is it, he whispered. The Krivak quarters are on the other side of this wall. He activated the scanner and began sweeping it slowly along the wall. Kate watched the screen, holding her breath. For a long minute, there was nothing. Then the device beeped softly and a readout appeared on the screen. Gotcha, Greg whispered. There's definitely jamming equipment in there. High-grade military hardware, the kind used to disable surveillance systems. This is what they used to kill the cameras. Kate felt a surge of triumph. Finally, real evidence, proof that the Krivak had the technology to commit the crimes. It wasn't enough to convict the specific soldiers, but it was something. It was a start. Record everything, she said. Make sure we have documentation that will hold up in court. Greg was already doing that, his scanner capturing detailed readings of the equipment behind the wall. He moved slowly along the shaft, scanning different sections, building a complete picture of what was hidden in the Krivak quarters. They were so focused on their work that they didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. The maintenance hatch behind them suddenly opened, flooding the shaft with light. Kate spun around and found herself staring at two Krivak guards, both armed. The message arrived on every human terminal simultaneously, bypassing station security protocols and official communication channels. It was simple, just 3 sentences and a massive data file attached. They thought no one would see. They were wrong. Here is the truth. Captain Price stared at his screen in growing horror as he opened the file. It contained everything. Kate's investigation notes, the medical evidence from Amy's case, Greg's research showing the pattern of attacks across multiple stations, the scan results proving the Krivak had jamming equipment, statements from other victims who had never been believed, communications between Krivak officers discussing how to cover up incidents. Someone had compiled every piece of evidence into one comprehensive document and released it to every human on the station. And based on the routing data Price could see, it hadn't stopped at the station. The message was spreading through human networks like wildfire, jumping from station to station, reaching colonies and Earth itself. His comm device lit up with incoming calls. Earth Command, the Human Colonial Council, news organizations. Everyone wanted to know what was happening on Harmony Point. Everyone wanted to know if the allegations were true. Price closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The careful political balance he had been trying to maintain had just exploded. There was no containing this now. The truth was out, and it was spreading faster than any official response could manage. He opened a channel to Kate Morrison. "Lieutenant, did you do this?" Kate's voice came back confused. "Do what, sir?" "Check your messages. Someone just released everything about the Sullivan case to the entire human population of known space." There was silence on the other end. Then Kate's sharp intake of breath. "It wasn't me, sir. My files are all encrypted and secured. I don't know how anyone could have accessed them." Price believed her. Kate was impulsive and stubborn, but she wasn't stupid. She would never have released classified information like this. Someone else had done it. Someone with access to multiple secure systems and the technical skill to break through encryption. His second comm device buzzed. Ambassador Vexthor demanding an immediate meeting. Price almost ignored it, but years of diplomatic training took over. He accepted the call. Vexthor's face appeared on the screen, his reptilian features twisted with rage. "What is the meaning of this, Captain?" "Your people have released false and defamatory information about my delegation. This is an act of war." "I'm investigating how the information was released," Price said, keeping his voice calm. "But, Ambassador, I should tell you that the information itself is accurate. My security team has verified the evidence. Your soldiers did attack Amy Sullivan. Your delegation did cover it up. You have no proof. The tribunal cleared my soldiers. The tribunal was a sham and we both know it. You controlled the outcome from the beginning." Vexthor's eyes narrowed. "Be very careful what you say next, Captain. The alliance between our peoples is at stake. The alliance was broken the moment your soldiers attacked one of my crew," Price said, and he realized as he said it that he meant it. "I've been trying to preserve something that was already dead. I was just too blind to see it." He ended the call before Vexthor could respond. His hands were shaking. He had just ended his career, possibly started an interstellar incident, and he didn't care. It felt like waking up from a long nightmare. His office door opened without anyone knocking. Kate Morrison stood there with Greg Palmer beside her. Behind them were a dozen other human officers, including Sergeant Kevin Ross and several Marines. "Sir," Kate said formally, "we need to talk about station security." Price looked at the group of determined faces and understood what was happening. They were forming ranks, choosing sides. The humans on the station were done pretending everything was fine. "I'm listening," he said. Kate stepped forward. "The information release has caused a reaction among the human crew. People are angry. They want the Krivak soldiers responsible for the attack arrested and held for trial. They want answers about how many other incidents were covered up. And, sir, they want to know if we're going to stand by our people or continue protecting the Alliance." "I know what they want, Lieutenant. The question is what we're going to do about it." "We protect our own," Sergeant Ross said from the back of the group. "That's what we do. That's what we should have done from the start." Price stood up and walked to the window. He could see part of the station's diplomatic quarter from here, the section where the Krivak delegation lived in isolated luxury. A small group of human crew members had gathered near the entrance. Not doing anything threatening, just standing there, watching. If we arrest those soldiers, the Krivak will see it as a violation of diplomatic immunity, Price said. They'll demand we release them. Earth Command will order us to comply. Then we refuse, Kate said simply. Sir, I've been checking the message traffic. That data release didn't just stay on this station. It's everywhere now. Every human colony, every ship, every outpost. People are reading about what happened to Amy. They're reading about the other victims, and they're not happy about the political calculations that let it happen. Greg pulled up his data pad and showed Price a stream of incoming messages. Reports from other stations showing human crews organizing, protests outside Krivak embassies on human colonies, military units refusing orders to provide security for Krivak delegations. It was spreading like fire through dry grass. This is bigger than us now, Greg said. This is humanity responding to an attack on one of its own. Whether we act or not, something is going to happen. Price made his decision. He had been trying to be a diplomat, to balance competing interests and maintain peace. But there were some things more important than peace. There were some lines that couldn't be crossed without consequences. Sergeant Ross, he said, take a security team and arrest the 3 Krivak soldiers identified by Amy Sullivan. Bring them to the brig. Anyone who interferes, human or alien, arrest them too. Ross snapped to attention. Yes, sir. Kate, I want you to coordinate with other human stations. Find out what they're doing, what they need from us. Greg, get me a complete analysis of our strategic position. If the Krivak react militarily, I need to know what we're facing. They moved quickly, filing out of his office with purpose. Price sat back down and opened a communication channel to Earth Command. He needed to report what he was doing before they heard it from the Krivak. He needed to explain why he was about to violate direct orders and possibly start a war. The face that appeared on his screen was Admiral Patricia Hughes, a woman he had served under during the last war. She looked older now, gray hair and tired eyes, but still sharp. Captain Price, she said, I assume you're calling about the data release. Yes, ma'am. I'm also calling to inform you that I'm arresting 3 Krivak soldiers for the assault on Amy Sullivan. Hughes was quiet for a moment. You know that violates diplomatic protocol. Yes, ma'am. I do. You know Earth Command has been trying to contain this situation, to prevent it from escalating. Yes, ma'am. And you're doing this anyway. Yes, ma'am. Price took a breath. Admiral, I've spent weeks trying to balance politics and justice. I tried to do what Earth Command wanted, but I can't anymore. That woman was attacked on my station. Her attackers walked free because we valued political convenience over her safety. I can't live with that. If it costs me my career, so be it. Hughes smiled slightly. Good, I was hoping you'd say that. Price blinked in surprise. Ma'am? I didn't call you by accident, Captain. I've been watching this situation develop. I've seen the data that was released, seen the evidence of systematic abuse being covered up for political reasons, and I've seen how humanity is responding to that information. She leaned forward, her expression intense. Earth Command is paralyzed right now, caught between political pressure and public outrage. They want to maintain the alliance, but they're also seeing millions of angry humans demanding justice. So I'm going to make this easy for them. I'm mobilizing every ship, every veteran, every resource I can access. If the Krivak want to fight over this, they'll get one. Admiral, I appreciate the support, but are you sure? The Krivak fleet is substantial. This could turn into a real war. It's already a war, Captain. It started when they decided our people were acceptable casualties for their entertainment. We just didn't realize it until now. She paused. Make the arrest. Hold those soldiers. Whatever happens next, humanity stands behind you. The call ended. Price sat in stunned silence for a moment, then reached for his station-wide communication system. If he was doing this, everyone needed to know why. This is Captain Price to all station personnel, he said. 2 hours ago, evidence was released showing that members of the Krivak delegation have been committing crimes against human personnel and covering up those crimes using their diplomatic status. I have reviewed this evidence and confirmed its accuracy. As of now, I am ordering the arrest of 3 Krivak soldiers for the assault of Amy Sullivan. This station will no longer participate in the cover-up of crimes against our people. Harmony Point stands for justice. Price out. The response was immediate. Human crew members erupted in cheers. Years of frustration and anger finally had an outlet. They had been forced. The Krivak battle fleet arrived at the edge of Harmony Point space exactly 60 hours after the arrests. 23 warships arranged in an intimidating formation that had broken the will of a dozen other species. Their weapons were powered up, their shields active. It was meant to be overwhelming, a show of force that would make the humans back down immediately. Captain Price watched them on his tactical display and felt his stomach tighten. His station had defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand against a full battle fleet. If the Krivak decided to attack, Harmony Point would be destroyed within minutes. But then his communications officer spoke up, her voice filled with wonder. "Sir, you need to see this." She put the long-range sensors on the main screen. Price saw it and had to grip his chair to steady himself. Ships. Hundreds of ships appearing from jump points all around the Krivak fleet. Human ships, every type and class he could imagine. Military dreadnoughts and patrol cruisers. Civilian transports that had been hastily armed. Old colony defense boats that should have been scrapped years ago. Even some ancient warships from the last Great War, pulled out of mothballs and crewed by veterans who had answered the call. They kept coming more and more, until the Krivak fleet was completely surrounded by a human armada 3 times its size. And more were arriving every minute, jumping in from colonies and outposts across human space. The communications officer was monitoring Krivak military channels, listening to their increasingly frantic conversations. "Sir, they're requesting instructions from their command. They're saying they're outnumbered and asking if they should withdraw." Price opened a channel to the Krivak fleet commander. The reptilian face that appeared on screen looked confident, but Price could see uncertainty in his eyes. The commander had expected to intimidate a single station. He hadn't expected to face the entire human species. "I am Captain Jacob Price of Harmony Point Station," Price said formally. "Your fleet is in violation of this station's security zone. You have 60 seconds to power down weapons and withdraw, or we will consider your presence an act of war." The Krivak commander bared his teeth. "You dare threaten us? We came to retrieve our personnel who you are illegally holding. Those personnel are under arrest for crimes committed on this station. They will face trial under human law. This is not negotiable." "Then you choose war," Price took a breath. This was the moment. Everything that happened next would depend on what he said in the next few seconds. If you fire a single shot, every human ship in this system will respond. And behind them are thousands more. Millions of humans who are tired of being told that your people's crimes don't matter. You wanted a war? You'll get one. But I promise you it won't end the way you think. The Krivak commander's expression shifted slightly. Fear, Price realized. The commander was actually afraid. He had come here expecting an easy victory, and found himself trapped by an enemy that had appeared from nowhere, driven by something his cold calculations couldn't predict. "You would risk everything over 3 soldiers?" the commander asked. "Over 1 female?" "Yes," Price said simply. "That's what you never understood about us. We don't measure the value of our people by some mathematical formula. One of ours was hurt. That's all that matters. That's all that ever mattered." The channel went silent. Price watched the tactical display, counting the seconds, wondering if he was about to witness the start of a war that would cost millions of lives. The human fleet held position, weapons ready but not firing. They were waiting for the Krivak to make the choice. On Earth, in the headquarters of the Human Colonial Council, similar conversations were happening at the highest levels of both governments. The Krivak leadership had sent urgent messages demanding the release of their soldiers. They had threatened economic sanctions, military action, the dissolution of all treaties. They had tried every form of pressure and intimidation they knew, and humanity had responded with a single message. No. Not open to negotiation. Not willing to discuss alternatives, just no. Return the criminals for justice or face the consequences. The Krivak conclave met in emergency session, their cold reptilian minds trying to process what was happening. They had built their strategy on the assumption that humans were rational, that they would choose the logical option when presented with clear cost-benefit analysis. Sacrifice 3 low-ranking soldiers or risk war with an established military power. The choice should have been obvious, but humans weren't choosing the logical option. They were choosing principle over pragmatism. They were willing to fight a war they might lose rather than abandon one injured woman. It was madness. It was irrational. It was completely human. One of the older conclave members who had studied human history tried to explain it to the others. They have a saying, "We do not leave anyone behind." They mean it literally. In their wars, they will risk entire operations to recover a single wounded soldier. They will spend enormous resources to bring home the bodies of their dead. Individual lives matter to them in ways we cannot calculate. That is weakness, another conclave member said. We should exploit it. We tried to exploit it, the old one replied. That is why we are in this situation. We thought their attachment to individuals made them vulnerable. We were wrong. It makes them dangerous. The debate continued for hours while the fleets faced each other in space. The Krivak had two choices and both were bad. They could attack and face a war they were no longer certain they could win, or they could back down and face the humiliation of surrendering to a species they had considered inferior. On Harmony Point, Kate Morrison was coordinating with security teams across the station. The tension was incredible. Everyone knew that one wrong move, one shot fired, could start something catastrophic. Human crew members were at battle stations. Krivak delegation members were confined to their quarters under guard. The station held its breath and waited. Amy Sullivan was also waiting, sitting in her quarters with Dr. Chen beside her. The doctor had insisted on staying with her, knowing that whatever happened next would affect Amy most of all. If the Krivak won this standoff, Amy would lose everything. Justice would be denied again, this time permanently. But if humanity stood firm, if they actually followed through on their threats, Amy's assault would have sparked an interstellar war. I never wanted this, Amy said quietly. I just wanted them to be punished. I didn't want people to die because of me. Dr. Chen took her hand. This isn't because of you, Amy, this is because of them. They made the choice to hurt you. They made the choice to cover it up. They made the choice to think they could get away with it. Everything that happens now is a consequence of their actions, not yours. But if there's a war, then there's a war. But it won't be your fault. It will be the fault of every person who chose political convenience over justice. Every person who decided your suffering didn't matter. They're the ones who created this situation. On the Krivak flagship, the commander received his orders from the conclave. He read them twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he opened a channel to Captain Price. Captain Price, he said, his voice stiff and formal. I have received instructions from my government. The Krivak conclave has agreed to your terms. The 3 soldiers in your custody will be extradited to face human justice. We are withdrawing our fleet. Price felt relief wash over him so intense it made him dizzy. Understood, Commander. Your withdrawal is acknowledged. There is one more thing, the commander said, and now his voice carried something that might have been respect. My government wishes me to convey that we miscalculated. We did not understand the nature of human attachment to individual members of your species. We will not make that mistake again. The channel closed. The Krivak fleet powered down weapons and began withdrawing, moving slowly away from the station. The human fleet held position, watching them go, making sure the retreat was genuine. When the Krivak were finally gone, a cheer erupted across every human ship in the system. They had done it. They had stood up to a major galactic power and won without firing a shot. More importantly, they had proven that human lives mattered, that attacking one human meant facing all of humanity. Captain Price made a station-wide announcement. This is Captain Price. The Krivak fleet has withdrawn. The crisis is over. All personnel can stand down from battle stations. And I want everyone to understand what happened here today. We showed the galaxy that humanity takes care of its own. We showed them that there are things more important than political convenience. We showed them who we are. In the station brig, the 3 Krivak soldiers sat in their cells, finally understanding that they would face consequences for their actions. The largest one, the one with the scar, kept staring at the walls, unable to process how everything had gone so wrong. They had been so careful. They had disabled the cameras. They had arranged alibis. They had diplomatic immunity. But none of that had mattered in the end. Because they had hurt a human, and humans didn't forgive that. Humans didn't forget. Humans came for their own, no matter what it cost. The trial took place 3 weeks later. It was held on Harmony Point, presided over by human judges but with observers from a dozen other